Hello everyone and welcome back to Naomi's Bookshelf. I feel like I look a little tanned today, but we're gonna go into my mid-month wrap-up. It is officially the warm season, I think, where I live. We've been hitting now like 17, 20 degrees weather, and I go out every day with the kids for about 45 minutes to an hour. So I'm getting some sun, I think, and I feel a little tanned. Anyways, let's start talking about the books I've read so far in the month. I think I've read 8 so far, which is pretty good. Although I'm gonna be honest, I've read like 3 graphic novels. This year I've read so many graphic novels, and like they're all kid graphic novels. But hey, I'm loving them, I'm enjoying them, or they're good at the very least. And honestly, you know what? They're also retellings often of my favorite classics, or they're classics in a way that I can enjoy. So why not? Let's just get into these books because let's just do it. I feel like it's been a little bit of a hard reading month so far, and like just graphic novels have been the way to go. So let's just get into these first since I'm talking about them. I first of all read, let's see, it's called Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy by, I'm going to get the author's names out 1 second. So it is by Ray Terciero. I hope I'm not saying that too wrong. And Brie Indigo, who is by the illustrations. And then obviously it is inspired by Little Women, which was by Louisa May Alcott. This book is a modern retelling of Little Women, and it is set in, I believe, New York. It was full of representation, which was so interesting. It's about these 4 sisters who have very interesting aspirations, and I feel like they did a really good job in modernizing it. I give it 4 stars, and I thought very well done. Meg is someone who just really wants to provide for her family. She did grow up with a single father, and she is fully Black. She is not mixed in any way. And then Jo grew up with her mother who is white, Caucasian. So she is fully white. And so she and Meg grew up like sisters. They're a little bit different in age, but their parents got married after the 2 girls were growing up independently. I guess that's how you would say it. And then they later had Beth and Amy. So Beth and Amy are both mixed race. And so their blended family was really beautiful to see, but also it was really interesting to see that diversity represented. Another representation was that Mrs. March was plus sized and Amy was also plus sized. So that was wonderful to see. And I was so excited that that was something represented, and it wasn't discussed. It was just there. I loved that. Another representation that was in there was that Jo was struggling with her sexuality. So that's another representation. This book was full of representation. I think that they did a really good job with modernizing it, especially with Beth's illness. That was really clever. I feel like I don't want to spoil classics, because when you read a classic for the first time, it can be really amazing and life-changing. So I don't want to spoil it too much, but I do say that they did a good job modernizing that aspect of the story. So you should totally read that part. Yeah, so with the whole thing about Laurie and their ambitions, they did a good job with taking what the girls had as options back in the 1800s and taking it forward with what they realistically could have. And then also with Mr. March being away overseas because he was in the army, and then having him being injured. Those different plot points I felt like were well modernized, and they really took the heart of Little Women and then transported it to modern day. So I really appreciate it and give it 4 stars. I think you should check it out if you are interested in graphic novels or interested in a modern retelling of Little Women. So my next graphic novel was Logan Likes Marianne. This one was illustrated by Gale Galligan, and this was written originally by Anne M. Martin. So this is book 7 or 8, I don't remember the number, in the Babysitter's Club graphic novel series. I really enjoyed this one. I give it 4 stars. Even though the art style wasn't completely my thing, I'm getting more used to it as I've gotten used to Gale's writing style or art style. I think I like this book better though because it's Marianne. I've always liked this particular book and this particular storyline just better because I feel like if you watched my last wrap up, you know I really like Marianne. I think she has always gotten, maybe not always gotten the brunt of it because she was just so shy, and that was me as a kid. I was so shy. I was so, I just struggled with expressing myself, and sometimes I do now. I feel like she just felt alone, and she really had to depend on her friends to be there for her, and I feel for her. So as a kid, I felt like I was Marianne, and so when she finally was able to express herself, and then with Logan Likes Marianne, and she was finally able to express herself with a boy, I felt for her, and I was so excited for her. And so I really liked this book as a kid. And then when I read this one, I was so excited for her too. And I remember that struggle of reading that book and being like, I hope she gets the boy, because I was boy crazy as a kid, and not so much anymore, but as a kid I was boy crazy. And I remember just wanting her to have that success. So I really enjoyed this one. It's all about her just wanting to have her success and wanting to have a good conversation with a boy that she likes. So enjoyed it a lot. Yeah. And it's also about Jessie coming into the group, which was really fun. I liked seeing Jessie be introduced and meeting her. She's always a great character. Excuse me. She's always a great character as well. She always brought some fun things to the dynamic, and her and Mallory as junior officers was always a great thing too. So my last graphic novel was read in tandem with a physical book. So we're going to talk about the physical book too, which is Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. I read this one for Buzzwordathon. Earth is a space word, and so it counted. And then I also read the graphic novel by Classics Illustrated. I found it on my library Overdrive app, and so I picked it up. I figured it might help me just understand this story better. And in all honesty, I didn't need it, but I finished it, so I gave it 3 stars. That one was fine. It definitely cut a lot of stuff out of the book, but it was meant for kids, and I did appreciate how at the end it said, if you enjoyed this, go find the original story and pick it up. So, I mean, it was good. Here's the picture of the cover. Anyways, this book I gave 4 stars too. I didn't expect to enjoy it so much. This book follows Axel. Axel has this crazy uncle, essentially, who is a scientist, and he is determined to make a great scientific discovery. But he's really kind of this crazy scientist in the sense that nobody thinks he's actually good at his job or good at science. And so he is really not being told that he's right in any way. So he's determined to prove them all wrong. And he finds these papers that tell him that he can go to the center of the earth. So as the title suggests, they go to the center of the earth. And it's about that journey. And it's literally the journey to the center of the earth. I was looking at this, and it's like, we got 2/3 into the book. I remember this book is 190 pages long, my copy, which these editions tend to be shorter anyways. I don't know why, they just tend to be. And so I think we were at page 120, or maybe, yeah, I think we were this far in, and there's dinosaurs on the cover. And I was like, we haven't seen dinosaurs yet. but they're still making their way to the center of the earth. And then shortly after, we saw dinosaurs. So it made sense, but it was about the journey, and it was really interesting. So they go on this crazy journey to the Nordic regions, to Iceland. They pick up this guide named Hans, who, he's an interesting fellow. He doesn't say much, but he's interesting. They travel through the center of the earth, and then they manage to get out so Axel can tell his story. It's so interesting. I really enjoyed every second of it. It was a little jarring at first because I was a little confused because of those names at the beginning. But honestly, if you're wanting to pick up some science fiction and you're not really sure where to start because you're not a science fiction reader like myself, but you do enjoy classics, this is a really good place to start. I think for me, reading classic sci-fi is the way to go because honestly, I mean, I'm used to the language, but it's not like classic, it's not modern sci-fi. It's not hardcore, but it will ease me up, you know? So, yeah. Journey to the Center of the Earth was good, and I'm actually interested to read more of Jules Verne work. I want to read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I think is his other one. I would like to read that one. I think it's another sci-fi. And I have watched the movie of this, so I want to rewatch it again. I have from the library. I still need to rewatch it. And then I know that the sequel to that movie is on Netflix, so I want to watch that one again too. But, I mean, it's going to be exciting because Journey to the Center of the Earth was not what I would expect to enjoy, but I did. One of the first things that I finished this month was actually an audiobook, and that was Quidditch Through the Ages by J.K. Rowling. I really just wanted to finish off the Hogwarts library things, whatever, the extra books, and I was hoping to read it for middle grade March. Didn't get to it. So I listened to that one, finished it off in April, and honestly, it was not a good audiobook for me. If you are new here, I have daily chronic migraines, and it is something that is just a part of my life. And when it comes to listening to things like audiobooks or music, I like to have things at a very expected pitch. I like to be very predictable in what I'm listening to, and that was not a predictable audiobook. When it came to the descriptions of the teams, I mean, I thought it was okay. Honestly, I'm not a sports person to begin with, so I wasn't expecting to really enjoy it. Anyways, I gave it 3 stars. I'm glad it was something in the universe because I do enjoy the universe, even if it's not always kind of my cup of tea, but Quidditch is kind of just one of those things. So I was like, the rules were okay, whatever. But then when they described the teams and it would be like the bats and like it was like that, like really high pitch. And I was listening to it while driving and I was like, it jolted me out, and I was like, it was like a screech in my ear. So I turned down the volume on my audiobook, and it would just, the next one would happen, and it'd be like, and this, and there'd be a whistle, and it'd be pew, and it was like screeching again, and it would be piercing my ears, and I was like, I'm very sensitive to sound because of my migraines, and so it just wasn't a good audiobook for me, although I don't think if I had read it, it would have been a good book to read anyways. So 3 stars. Otherwise, it was a good audiobook. The accents were great, but not good sound effects in my opinion. So 3 stars for Quidditch Through the Ages. So another one that I read was The Forgotten Daughter by Joanna Goodman. This one I read for my book club, and I didn't really enjoy it. Now, this one I'm also putting in my TBR clue for my Professor Plum prompt, as it says forgotten in the title. And like I said in my TBR clue game, I've always attributed Professor Plum with being very forgetful. I don't think I'm going to get to Born Supremacy this month, so I'm putting this in there. But The Forgotten Daughter is about several things. It's technically the sequel to The Home for Unwanted Girls, which was about the Dupree orphans in Quebec when many orphans were removed from homes. So let me set the background stage for this. So this is Naomi from the future, editing and trying to make sense of the history of the Forgotten Daughter. I'm going to explain it better here, I think. So in Home for Unwanted Girls, it discusses the history of orphans being taken from their unwed mothers and brought to orphanages. And in the 1950s, when the government decreed that everyone who was in an insane asylum was given more money than orphanages were. So then the church deemed many orphanages to be insane asylums instead. Now, instead of just removing those orphans from those orphanages, they then took those orphans and deemed them insane, and then made them be enslaved essentially in those orphanages, which are now insane asylums. They beat them, they abused them, they neglected them, they tortured them, they did experimental treatments on them. It was a really horrible time in Quebec history. That is the history and origin of Home for Unwanted Girls. Then we move into the plot of the Forgotten Daughter. So that was book 1 in the Home for Unwanted Girls. In book 2 for the Forgotten Daughter, it kind of followed up in the 1930s when the Dupree orphans were fighting for their rights to get some compensation because they had, through that trauma, they had been abused, they had been neglected, they had been sexually assaulted, they had been physically assaulted, they had been so many traumas have been placed on them. And this is like history, not historical fiction, like this is history, that they decided to sue the government and the church. So The Forgotten Daughter was a sequel about that. But yet it wasn't. It was also about how how Quebec was wanting to separate from Canada, and how they were having many, many votes and many, many arguments against the country to be separated and become their own country. So there was this whole debate, and the book really covered everything. And I feel like the book just covered too much. It was just overwhelming with information. It was too scattered. It covered Elodie, who in the first book for Home for Unwanted Girls was the orphan who went from being an orphan to a patient in an insane asylum, and then being freed and finding her family, to, in this book, she is a Dupree orphan trying to get some compensation for what she suffered. But at the same time, her family, who she has found since, her brother is now a reporter for this separatist movement, and his girlfriend, who is an illegal smuggler. Like, it just was so scattered because she's also a separatist, the illegal smuggler, and it was just these two conflicting stories. And I felt like I was wanting to learn more about Quebec history through this book, but it was just way too much going on. If it had been one cohesive story about the French, not the French, but the Quebec separatist movement, I would have been much more intrigued. And if it had been, by the way, James, the reporter, is actually writing a story about the Dupree orphans as well, instead of him being immediately connected to the Dupree orphans, I would have been much more happy with that. But it just felt so disconnected. I'm sorry for that long explanation about that book, but it just felt like everything was so convoluted, but it just felt like a giant history lesson. And at the same time, it felt just so much, but too much, and then too conflicting and too fighting. And it felt like two stories at once, and it just didn't feel natural. So, yeah, I give it 2 stars. I mean, if you're wanting to learn something about Quebec history, I mean, it's a great one to pick up about the 90s. I was like 5 years old at the time that many of those things went down. So not something I would have remembered at all, but it was something to think about, and to learn about. But at the same time, it was just too much going on in one book. I feel like that could have been 2 books and I would have been much happier. On to better and brighter things. I finished a series. This is Rich People Problems by Kevin Kwan. I finished the final book in the Crazy Rich Asians trilogy. I really enjoyed this trilogy. I don't know what I expected when I picked up the first one. I watched the movie when I picked up Crazy Rich Asians, and I was like, I just want to read the book. And then my book club had picked it up, so I ended up reading the whole series. I'm so glad I finally finished this one. It was just delightful and like hard hitting, and it was just good. It was just good. And I feel like I don't know how to explain this to you because it is a sequel, and I don't know. These are very literary and satire, and it's my cup of tea, apparently. This series follows several rich families in, like, and when I say rich, I don't mean like millionaires. I mean like quadrillionaires in China or Singapore or wherever in Asia, as they are dealing with life. And Kevin Kwan comes from that family background, so he is kind of telling the truth about his own family history, about his own family and friends. Kind of, it's a satire about this people, but it's also at the same time being like, you know what, money doesn't take away family drama. It adds to it, I think, in some ways. It also doesn't take away problems and marital strife. It doesn't make your life perfect. It really doesn't. So man, a really great wrap up to a series. I'm going to do a series review of this actually, and I'm going to do a spoiler-free section at the beginning, but at the same time, I'm going to do a full spoilery review of this series, I think. So we'll keep your eye peeled for that one. I'm really excited to do a series review of this. But yeah, I finally finished this series. I can't believe it, and I'm excited for that. So my last book that I read so far this month, so far this half of the month, was Murder in Mesopotamia by Agatha Christie. I read this with Verne from Verne's Bookish Adventures, and Tiffany from Beautiful Minutia. I'm sorry, Tiffany. My mouth is not working quite right now. Anyways, I loved this one. I will link them both down below. And I'm not giving it a 5-star. I'm giving it a 4-star. I think it was just not as engaging with me as most Agatha Christie's are, but I really did enjoy this one. I think this one's really clever. It's really good. I saw someone's description of it on Goodreads, which it just made me laugh because it's just so true. So someone asked on Goodreads, the question was like, what's the summary of this book? And someone answered, murder happens in Mesopotamia and Poirot solves it. Yeah, that's about it. No, it's so funny because there's this team of archaeologists who are in Mesopotamia, and mischievous things happen. There's this nurse who has been commissioned by a doctor to write what happened, and so she is writing down her account of the events on this archaeology site that with these people, and a murder does happen. So I think the best way to go into it is just not knowing who dies and who people are. I think it's really good. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I give it 4 stars. I think the best thing about Agatha Christie is you just never know what to do. I never know who to trust, who not to trust. I never know what to expect with her, and I think that's great. So I think she's brilliant all the time. If you haven't caught on by now, I love Agatha Christie. So yeah, Murder in Mesopotamia was my last book that I finished so far this month. I'm still in the middle of several, but I'm in the middle of 2 buddy reads currently, and I'm still in the middle of Emily Dickinson's Letters, and I am just keeping along with several other books but I am enjoying all of my books right now, so that's always a good thing. But yeah. So that will be the end of this mid-month wrap-up. Please let me know down in the comments if you know of any classic graphic novels that I should pick up, because seriously, I've been loving them. But also if you are interested in any review videos, because I would love to. I've been thinking about filming one of those of my favorites. Also, if you are new here, please like this video and subscribe. Also, if you're not new here, please like as well. And I will talk to you in my next video. Bye for now.